When cells divide, it has to have a very orderly fashion for most of what goes on. Some of it doesn't matter that much. If when the cell divides, there's 20 mitochondria in one of the new cells and 22 in the other, that's not a big deal. But the genetic information has to be copied in very much detail and make sure you have exactly one copy in each of the two new cells. So there's little control stops along the way to help ensure this happens. And when those stops don't work right, we get tumors from uncontrolled cell division, and sometimes we also refer to that as cancer. The first major checkpoint is at the end of the G1 phase to start to begin the S phase, which would be your protein synthesis or DNA synthesis. If for some reason the environmental conditions do not favor cell division, perhaps it's in too tight of a space so it won't be able to grow more, and things won't work out that way, or if it's been resting too long, which is sometimes referred to as a G0 phase, and that would be like when a cell's not going to divide anymore just because it's been resting for way too long. It won't divide, or division will be delayed. CDK and cyclin are two proteins that are involved in this checkpoint in letting the cell know if it's ready to move on. And if those aren't functioning, then a cell that's not ready to divide may divide. So typically this checkpoint here will stop the cell division, but if something goes amok, then the cell will divide when it's not ready to, and that's one of the cases where you can get a tumor. The next checkpoint is at the end of G2. So theoretically, if everything's all set to go, you've got DNA duplicated in S phase, you have it separated from the strands in G2 phase so that you're ready to go, and you know you have exactly two copies. And if for some reason the DNA is damaged, then the cell will not divide and it will not go to mitosis. If, however, once again, there's a problem with the proteins that work at this checkpoint, then the cell will go ahead and divide even though it's not ready to and doesn't have the right DNA. And once again, that's what causes a tumor or cancer, or can cause other defects in the cell. The third other major checkpoint is called the metaphase checkpoint. And metaphase is a phase in mitosis that you're going to learn about, where what happens is you have chromosomes line up across from each other in the center of the cell, so that when the cell splits apart, each new cell has exactly one copy of every chromosome it needs. And for some reason, these weren't lined up correctly. Perhaps like you've got an extra one of those over here, then the cell will not go through cell division because it needs to make sure that the two new cells each have one copy of that genetic information. And so at that point, cell division will stop and the cell will not divide, and you'll prevent incomplete cells or overcomplete cells from existing. Once again, if however there's some problems with the regulators and a cell goes on and divides there, then you can have your problems with cell division like your tumors and cancer and other issues like that. In summary, our cells have a few major checkpoints to make sure that division is occurring properly, and this is based mostly on the genetic information because that's the information that must be divided evenly between the two new cells. And if something goes wrong with those checkpoints, we can get tumors from uncontrolled cell division. It can keep dividing even when it shouldn't be, and that can damage organs and tissues, and we know, I'm sure, some of the harms of cancer.